if you could just start fresh and just step into who it is you want to be, would that version of you have this thing in their environment, on their desk, in their house, on their walls? Would that version of you, if they were at the store, buy that thing right now? Would they start that project? Would they write that down and keep it? Would that version of you surround themselves with this thing? And if not, then that's a huge clue to get rid of it, or to change the situation, or to make it work for who it is you are becoming. Welcome to Breakthrough Mode, the podcast where we intentionally get into the driver's seat of our lives, shift out of monotony and mediocrity, and step on the gas towards becoming the person we were always meant to become. Hello and welcome to episode 252 on the Breakthrough Mode podcast. I am your host, Megan Bauer. Thank you so much for joining me today and pushing play on today's episode. If you have been following along all week on our very first themed week, you know that our theme of the week has been making space to become. And this Friday episode, we are going to dive deeper into why this is important, why I'm bringing it up now, and how it will actually make an impact on you if you mindfully go through your organizing, your cleaning, your reset, your refresh with this perspective in mind. And the reason I picked this topic for this first week of April is because we tend to have a natural energy when spring starts setting in to declutter and to organize and to rearrange the furniture and to have a refresh and a reset. And since you are likely already doing that, I wanted to give you this perspective so that you can do it in maybe a different way with a different intention, because you can declutter and organize just for the sake of organizing, for making things look nice and for making things more functional. That can definitely be the only intention. Beauty and function are great intentions. And I want to offer this to you. Your environment reinforces your identity. The things that you keep around you, the things that you interact with on a daily basis, reinforce who you are. So sometimes when we are trying to become someone else, it feels difficult because everything around us represents past decisions, past versions of ourselves, who we were in the past. And when we start to clear out the things that represent past versions of ourselves, we are literally making space to become the next version of who we want to be. Because you can't keep cramming more into your life, more into your identity, without the process of removal. So this is less about organization and beautifying and function, to me, at least, and more about identity alignment, removing the things that don't align with who you want to become so that you have space for the things that do align with who you want to become. Just as an illustration, I know people who make healthy breakfast smoothies every single day. So it's normal for their blender to be out on the counter, right? The blender lives in this spot on the counter because they interact with that blender every single day. I don't make smoothies. I use my blender for salsa, which I don't make on a daily basis. So my blender does not live on the counter. If I were to decide that I wanted to have healthy smoothies every morning, it would be an identity reinforcing choice for me to then move my blender to live on the counter to remind me of who I am becoming. And hey, the blender is right here. You should make that smoothie. I love looking into windows. I love looking into garages. I love looking into open doors because I love observing how people live and what they have, not in this like covetous way, but in this what is important to that person that they would have it out on the counter, out on the table, hanging on their walls. What is important to this person that they would keep it as a daily interaction piece? So as you go through your house, your environments, ask yourself that. If somebody were to walk into my house, if Megan were to look through my windows, what would she think about what I find important? Not just the actual thing, but the meaning behind the thing. So if I were to look in a window and they had religious pictures, I could infer that religion was important to this person. If they had family photos hanging on their wall, I could infer that they had a priority on their family. If they had a cookbook open on a nice cookbook stand, I could infer that cooking is something they love to do, or at least it's something that they aspire to and want to keep this reminder out on their counter to make this thing because that's something that calls to them. Likewise, when I walk through my house and I see things that I have piled up, I lovingly call them piles, that reinforces the identity to me that I struggle with making decisions around things. And I know I've dug into it. I know that I struggle making these decisions about things because it's like, what if I need it someday? What if, I don't know. If this is my kid's artwork and if I throw it away, it'll be gone forever. There's all of these things. It's so much easier to just pile it up than to make the decision about the thing. But having that silent pile communicates to me that I struggle with making decisions around things. So imagine how good it feels when I finally go through and I get rid of all of the piles and it feels open and it feels spacious. And I'm like, okay, great. Now I have space mentally and physically to become a different version of me. I can now choose from this point on that anything that comes through the door, when I'm tempted to pile it up, I can make a decision about that thing right away. I can trust myself to do that. So you have things around you that reinforce the identity of who you are right now because they represent past versions of you. And when you are striving to become someone new, to live a new life, to have a new experience of life, the things around you in your environment must shift to match who it is you are becoming. Now, of course, the first step of that is to get rid of whatever does not currently align with the direction that you're going so that you have that space to put in something that does align. And that's not necessarily like I get rid of this thing right now and, Amazon delivers the new thing tomorrow. Maybe you don't even know what needs to go there. Maybe you don't even know what needs to evolve into that space, but having the space is actually the important thing. Removing the reinforcement and the reminders of who you have been gives you a quiet, silent permission to be who you want to be next, because you don't have all of this silently communicating to you who you are. Now, this can get really tricky because we can have things that are sentimental. We can have things that really have a lot of meaning to us, but they don't match who we are becoming. In those instances, I invite you to question the memory. So yes, this thing could represent something in your past, and maybe you want to keep it. Keep it if that memory reinforces something positive. If that memory gives you this, like, oh, I remember when we did that, and I'm so glad we did that, and I'm glad that this happened and that happened and whatever. And if it doesn't, if that thing gives you the feelings of like, oh, I wish we hadn't, or I hadn't, or I just, I don't love the way that went, blah, 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 give yourself the permission to get rid of it, because you want the things that reinforce the behavior of the person you want to become. Even if it represents something from the past, if it's still an attribute or it still, has a place in who you are becoming, that is still something to hold on to. Because even though it's reinforcing a past, it's reinforcing a part of you that you still want to keep going forward. So I'm one of those sentimental people. I'm extremely sentimental, and it's very difficult for me to get rid of things that even if it has maybe a negative memory, it's difficult for me to get rid of those things because it represents a part of who I was. It represents a part of my past. And I know that by keeping that thing around, it is reinforcing who I have been rather than giving me the freedom to who I am becoming. If you must keep these things, I would encourage you to keep them in a box, put away where you don't actually interact with it on a daily basis. It's not in your visual field. It's not something that, comes into your face when it's time to dust or whatever. It's something that is boxed up and put away so that you have it. It is there and it is in its place in your memory and in the past, not something in your present, which will then guide and shape your future. We can also hold on to things because of an idea of future scarcity. This is me too, because I can see so much potential in the most random stuff. I'm like, what if we need that today for some craft project that the girls might have? And it's all based on this like what if scenario that this will be the only time I'll ever have it. And if I don't have it, then I won't be able to get more. And it's all based in the scarcity mindset rather than letting it go and trusting that if I need it, I can get it again. I had this situation a couple of years ago with my youngest daughter. I had given away all of this ribbon. I wasn't really using ribbon and I had a ton of it. And I was like, I don't need this ribbon. I'm not using it. I don't even foresee a need for it. So I got rid of a ton of ribbon. And then it was like a few short months later, she had a project in which we needed 100 pieces of ribbon. And I could have taken that moment and been like, this is evidence that I needed to keep the ribbon. Instead of, I actually took it like, well, this is evidence that if I need it, I can go get it and it'll be fine. And now she gets to pick the ribbon and now it's something that she really likes and whatever. It was a it was evidence that I can get rid of something and if I need it, I can safely get it again. It's not a one-time thing. Meanwhile, the ribbon that I gave away was used and very appreciated. And so it was a great thing all around, even though I did get rid of something that I later needed. Also, how often does that happen? Not very often. That's literally the only situation that I can think of where I've gotten rid of something and then needed it shortly thereafter. So really, that's like a one-off. Most of the time we can get rid of things and we don't need it. We're good. We are good. So the first step in this process as you go through your decluttering and your organizing is Be aware of what is around you. Be aware of how it makes you feel, whether it uplifts you, like, yes, I'm so glad we did that, or I'm so glad I have this, or this is so supportive, or whether it makes you feel guilt or shame or any number of negative emotions where it really kind of drags you down. Those are the things that are going to be a silent weight in your environment. And when you get rid of them, when you change the situation, you will feel lighter in your environment. This is maybe, projects that you've started and no longer want to complete. This is maybe a stack of post-it notes that you've scribbled down things on that, consolidate them or just throw them away. That's me. That is my desk. It is always a litter of post-it notes until I decide, okay, I'm going to write down what's important in a notebook and throw all of these things away, because these things around you are reinforcing who you are. So become aware of what's around you, how it feels, and whether or not it is aligned with who you are becoming. If you could just start fresh and just step into who it is you want to be, would that version of you have this thing in their environment, on their desk, in their house, on their walls? Would that version of you, if they were at the store, buy that thing right now? Would they start that project? Would they write that down and keep it? Would that version of you surround themselves with this thing? And if not, then that's a huge clue to get rid of it, or to change the situation, or to make it work for who it is you are becoming. The next trick is to continually make these edits. Becoming is a continuing journey. And because it's a continuing journey, this is not a one-time process. And the more that you can mindfully and intentionally shape your environment to support who it is you are becoming, the faster you will be able to become, because you won't have all of this silent reinforcement for who you are right now or who you have been. Because you won't have this silent reinforcement of who you have been. When you let go of all of that, you make the space for who you want to become. So it would be worth it then for you to build in some systems of, like, every time you buy a new shirt, an old shirt goes out, that one in, one out sort of system, or have a weekly reset. This is something that I aspire to have a weekly reset of my desk, where I clear all the post-it notes, where I put away the books that I've been, flipping through and taking bits out of, where I put all of the things away that I have accumulated over the week and start fresh Monday morning. That is something that I truly do aspire to implement into my routine. So you could have a weekly reset where you go through and make sure that everything is supportive for who you want to step into in the following week. Also, having designated homes for things, like the sentimental things, like the things that you work with. Having a home for everything will help you feel like you have the space to become who it is you want to become, because you're not tripping over all this random stuff. Everything having a home. So there are 3 key places that I want to invite you to go through most mindfully, because they're very personal spaces as it comes to your becoming. The first is your closet. The things that are hanging up there in your closet that you choose from to put on your body to represent yourself. There might, most likely, probably be things in your closet that no longer fit who you are right now, and they certainly don't fit who you are becoming. And it is a disservice to have to, move through these things as you look for the things that you actually wear. And it's time to let those things go. Again, there are those sentimental things. I have sentimental shirts. Send it off to make a t-shirt quilt out of them, or do something useful with those shirts that you don't necessarily want to let go of and you don't wear. But be intentional and be mindful, because your closet is the space that you literally go into to prepare yourself to face the day, to do the things that you need to do and want to do. And it is a subconscious place of becoming. And so when you can get ready in this space of, I am becoming who it is I want to become, it will be extremely powerful for you. The second space I want you to look at is whatever is beside your bed. If you have a nightstand or a bookshelf or a desk or whatever it is, that space right there. It's the last space you likely see before you go to bed. And it's likely the first space you see when you wake up. And that space right there can be really important to signaling who you are and who you want to become. As messy as my desk gets and as messy as my work table gets, my nightstand stays pretty clear because that is such an important place for me to keep space for the books that I want to read, for the person I am becoming, for the important notes that I scribble down in the middle of the night when it's dark. I keep that space clear. The last space I want you to take a look at with this intention in mind is your workspace. Now, I've told you, my workspace is a wreck. It does not adequately represent who it is I want to become. This is an area that I certainly need work in. However, even as I extend this invitation to you, I extend it to myself as well, because the space that you work in impacts the work that you do and who it is you are as you create that work. So I do have important things on my desk that get to stay. I've got pictures of my girls, and I've got my journal, of course, and I've got all of the functional things. And I know that there's a stack of Post-it notes that I need to go through. I know that I have random stuff that does not reinforce who it is I want to become. And once I take the time to go through my desk, I will feel a literal shift in how I am able to come up to my work and how I show up for my work. That's what I have for you today. On Saturday, I will send you an emotional completion exercise to your email if you are signed up for my emails. If you're not, there is a link in my show notes for you so you can sign up for my emails and get that emotional completion exercise for this week of making space for who you want to become. And of course, on Monday, I will be back on the podcast to introduce our next theme of the week. Thank you so much for joining me today. I totally love you. Bye for now.